Welcome everybody. For those who are on the West Coast and I guess putting aside your responsibilities earlier in the day, we really appreciate that and applaud you on your choices, on your life choices. That's great. For those of you who are on the East Coast, you've already been waiting for us for a couple of hours, and if you dove in before we got started, we also commend you on your choices. I'm going to start in right away and introduce our illustrious panel. All long, I don't want to say former bartenders because I feel like none of you have really recovered from that yet. I just want to say long-time experienced bartenders who are now all in the Tennessee whiskey business. So I'm going to do them just, you've all actually sat like on my screen. You're in the order that I have you on my list anyway, so this works out really nicely. So I have Greg West here, who I know from the Bay Area, is originally a small, simple Ohio boy, but was able to make his what? No,
I'm from San Diego, but it's fine.
Oh, I'm
I
just
lived in
kidding.
Ohio for 1 year, but it's okay.
I'm sorry. I met you first
Totally
in
okay.
Cleveland, so that's fine.
Yes, you did.
My
Yes, you
bad.
did. That's true. Yeah,
Can I call you a simple Ohio boy from now till the end of time?
totally.
Great.
I mean,
Perfect.
we're best friends, right? It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. San Diego, keeping it super real. Greg was in San Francisco and is now based in Texas, where he runs that part of the country for George Dickel. And then to my right over here, I have Lucia Creed, who has been a bartender at some of my favorite places, including I went to Palmetto last night for the first time, which is your former stomping grounds.
That was.
At least the space is.
When it was Flora.
Yeah, and she was with Del McGay, which you guys know for many years, and is now the director of marketing for the whole country for Uncle Nearest. And then E2's already on his first beverage, which I really enjoy. Is the U.S. So he's basically the national brand ambassador for Jack Daniels, and so and I also know him from Los Angeles, and he is going to talk a little bit later about his experiences in the current state of affairs of bars and bartending and liquor industry in terms of the move he just made from Southern California to Atlanta. So he's got a lot of stuff to tell you as well. So we're going to dive right in, and we're going to talk about Tennessee whiskey. I'm going to have Greg start off by talking to us about the basics of the category, because a lot of people just don't know what makes Tennessee whiskey Tennessee whiskey.
Absolutely. And, I kind of was one. I luckily spent 17 years behind a bar. Yeah, I know I'm very old. Okay, laugh it up. Anyways, but in that time, there you get exposed to so much, and my time at Bourbon and Branch was obviously super influential, super impactful in my career, and still to this day. And so we get accustomed to like tasting things all the time and kind of growing your palate and figuring out the ins and outs of what is an American whiskey, what's a Tennessee whiskey, what's a bourbon, and shocker, guys, there is very little difference between a bourbon and a Tennessee whiskey. In fact, Tennessee whiskey has to hit every box that makes it a bourbon. Plus, it goes through one extra step called the Lincoln County process, which is a filtration process where, we chill our whiskey down to about 40 degrees and we run it through a giant vat filled with sugar maple charcoal, and that's it. And if you whiskey enthusiasts out there, I know that they like to they don't think that Tennessee whiskey is a bourbon. I promise you, it is in every way. In fact, Nicole Austin, our master distiller, she's like my second or third favorite person in the entire universe. We are releasing a 8-year-old Tennessee bourbon coming out in like July or August. So we're going to show y'all that you can't be from Tennessee and call yourself a bourbon. So that really kind of is the thing. So let's talk about the law, right? Because we have to talk about the law. The law states for bourbon that you must be made in the United States. not just in Kentucky. So you can make it in Alaska if you wanted to. I don't know why you would, but you could.
Be careful. We do have Alaskan subscribers.
That's okay.
Watch it.
It's okay, y'all. It's purely about climate. Okay, so we'll talk about that later. But you cannot be distilled over 160 proof. You cannot be bottled anything less than 80 proof. You can't enter the barrel anything higher than 125 proof. You have to be obviously at least 51% or more corn, and you must be charred in a new oak container, and of course, no color or flavors added to that. So, when I talk about the Lincoln County process, it's kind of like a giant Brita filter. We all know Brita filters. We probably have them in our home, on our faucet, in the refrigerator. And does that add any color, any flavor to your water? Of course it doesn't. So this is kind of the same thing. And when you're working with such a high mash bill, and key word, guys, remember this mash bill for George Dickel specifically, we are 84 corn, 8 rye, 8 malted barley. So when you have something that high corn, you kind of just get certain impurities that are harshnesses in whiskey. And so just chill filtering that through that sugar maple charcoal allows us to pull out those impurities and really kind of make just a wonderful, smooth drinking whiskey. Specifically, I want to talk about one of our new marks. This is George Dickel's single barrel 15-year. This sweet little gal's coming in at 104.6 proof.
Did you say this sweet little gal?
The reason why I say that.
How long have you officially been in Texas?
I haven't said y'all yet, have I? Damn it. Okay.
Maybe not, I don't know.
Have I said y'all yet? Okay. Donnie, you know me for many years. If anyone doesn't know this, Donnie and I also share the same birthday. Like, we were born on the same day, the same year, hours apart from each other. So our love for each other is real.
Yeah, we're basically twins.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But with that being said, like, the reason why I brought this one up specifically, this SKU, is because when you think of something as 104.6 proof, usually it's kind of hot. It's kind of a kick in the teeth. You're not really able to kind of perceive all the layers of flavor. But because we do this Lincoln County process, man, it is such a sweet little guy. 104.6 proof, like it's so approachable. And that's one thing that I can talk about, because I've had Jack Daniels for years, the #1 selling whiskey in the universe, Jack Daniels, and the newly Uncle Nearest. I mean, such an incredible story. But like we're all trying to give you whiskey that's approachable, and that's really what it's all about. And that Lincoln County process does that for us. So that's,
and 104.6 isn't really that high, considering the fact that a lot of people are getting more accustomed to bottled and bond now. I mean, we're really only talking about 2% higher ABV. It's not crazy.
It's not, but like for me, like anything, I mean, and this is coming from somebody who spent years behind a bar, like anything over like 115 is a blowout for me personally. I like the whole act of like, sharing whiskey and talking about whiskey and sipping over it and seeing how your perception of that said whiskey changes over time. And so, I don't want to have something that's, above 115. I'm going to have one and I'm done, so it's not really advantageous for sharing and enjoying company and enjoying the said whiskey, in my personal opinion. But
gotcha.
To all of you who love high proof stuff, I get you. It's awesome. And I implore you to continue to do that. Just obviously drink responsibly. That's all I got to say.
That's true. I mean, for a while, I'm sure, Lucia, you can probably talk to, like, coming from mezcal, you're like, it's under 47. I mean,
yeah.
What's the point? I don't really understand. I would like to ask you and ET also, to all of you as longtime bartenders, like, what was your relationship with Tennessee whiskey?
This first me?
Oh no, you've already talked too much.
Oh, I have. Okay, good. Right.
Yeah, but you cram so much into a small period of time, which is why I really appreciate you.
Perfect.
Well, go ahead, Ms. Creed. Take it away.
Thank you. I had an interesting relationship with Tennessee whiskey. I think coming up in the Bay Area in, both kind of all different kinds of bars, but for a long time I was in kind of craft bars, and there was not a huge amount of respect for Tennessee whiskey at the time. I was a bartender for 15 years. That was a few years ago, so it's been a while. But, you know, I worked at bars that were really into, like Donnie was saying, mezcal, and Tennessee whiskey was often talked about as being almost too smooth. And, you know, as I have moved into this category, I don't find that true at all. I find that there's this amazing combination. Yes, there is smoothness, but there's also so much flavor. And, you know, I'm sipping on the Uncle Nearest 1856 right now. It's got every bit as much flavor as any, you know, other American whiskey or whiskey period, for that matter. But I definitely think that when I was bartending, there was not as much respect for Tennessee whiskey. And I think that that's something that all three of us on this panel are really working on, and our brands are working on, because as Greg said, you know, Tennessee whiskey is bourbon plus one. It goes through everything bourbon does, and it has to go through this additional filtration, that, you know, does round off some of those edges, but doesn't take away the flavor.
Yeah.
ET?
Yeah, I did what you just said, but Greg was joking about how long you bartended. I bartended for about 25 years. And
What?
Okay.
You don't look old enough for that.
Okay. I have to interrupt because ET, could you please tell everyone who created the surfer on acid?
Well, it was one of the three of us, and it wasn't either one of you. So yeah, I'm that old.
That's gonna, by the way, that's gonna cause a tizzy in the private Facebook group. There's gonna be a lot of surfer on acid chit chat
That's
after this.
amazing.
Yeah,
I love that drink. I think it's still good. I think it still has a presence. I love it. I just love that I know that about you.
Blending Amaros and very delicate coconuts. You know, it's very high level for me. But no, so my relationship is a little bit different because I started bartending long before there was anything called craft cocktail. Craft cocktails for us was the Kuiper, Razzmatazz, and sour mix. But even before that, my mother basically bred me on rock and roll, and my father was all Sinatra all the time. And both those worlds meet at Jack Daniel's. So it was no surprise when I turned 21 and reached for a bottle. I reached for a bottle of Jack Daniel's. I mean, literally behind me, that quilt, that crochet thing was in my mom's little music area. And next to it was a bunch of records. She had a crazy record. She still does, although I stole most of it. And the first record I ever took out on my own was this one right here, Zeppelin 4.
Yeah.
And, I might not say it's, to this day, I'm obsessed with Zeppelin, but I might not say it's my favorite physical graffiti. But that is what turned me on to rock and roll. And that Jimmy Page drinking delicately out of the bottle, got me there. But then you become an adult, right? And you can make your own decisions. And I kept drinking Jack because I liked it. And then my parents and I and my sister all lived in different areas. So we met in Nashville just for fun. And the last day we were there, my parents were like, what should we do? And I got to the lobby somehow first. And I see a Jack Daniel's thing. And I'm like, oh, why are you guys advertising for Jack Daniel's? Like, oh, it's about an hour down the road. I'm like, what? Yeah. So my parents come down, I'm like, that's where we're going. And then I realized, as you were mentioning, how Tennessee whiskey didn't get a lot of street cred. Mm. When I got there, it's like, holy shit, I can't believe how much Jack Daniel's puts into what they do. And as our master distiller, Chris Fletcher, whose grandpa was our master distiller years and years ago, his big quote is, once the whole grain enters our distillery, no other source touches our process until we put it in the bottle. So everything that is going into our whiskey we make, our charcoal, our yeast, the same water that Jack used, the same cave that Jack found, our number one ingredient that flavors our whiskey, the barrel, we make them. So I do think it was kind of a learning curve. Like Scotch got all the street cred in the 80s, right? American whiskey no one loved. And then all of a sudden there's this bourbon boom, and all of a sudden bourbon, we know there's laws and we know there's all these rules. Now bourbon gets all the street cred. And I think Tennessee whiskey is starting to say, hey, don't forget, we do all the things they do and one more thing. Mm-hmm. So I think I started with music, ended with the whiskey in the bottle.
I didn't know that about your history with it. So when it came to, when the position became available.
Not a position. That's what's great about it. So I worked at a bar in LA for the last bar I worked at. I was there 15 years. And when the owner built this one, he owns a billion things, but when he built this is his first, grown-up bar, restaurant, and he combined three things that he loved in LA and these restaurants. One was Musso and Frank's, and he had these little martini shakers like they did. One was Dan Tannis, so we had these red and white checkered old school Italian tablecloths, and one was the Rainbow Room on Sunset. So in order to get that rock and roll vibe, he built over the bar these cages, an entire restaurant. No reason for these cages, but 144 bottles of Jack Daniels. So when I got there, when they opened, I was like, oh my God, I have to work here. It's like nirvana for me. So I finally got there and stayed for 15 years. And all the Jack people in LA knew that I loved Jack. And eventually, and Jack had no ambassadors, the weirdest thing in the world. And that's partly why everyone's like, oh, Tennessee whiskey must mean nothing, because we weren't out there telling our story. And then they're like, oh shit, we should probably tell our story. So they asked me to host a dinner just for fun. And I think they actually paid me in whiskey, not cash. And
wait, they actually pay you money now?
Now they do, yeah. I think there's something about
talk.
laws and, rights and stuff like that. But yeah, so I did that dinner. And then, do you know the Queen Mary in San Pedro, the giant ship?
Yeah.
So after this tiny little intimate dinner where I had no training, like, oh, can you do one of these at the Queen Mary? I'm like, yeah, like very similar, might be a couple more people. This is like full on ballroom suits and ties and dresses. And I was the only speaker for 2 hours with no training. And there's a lot of people that love Jack there. So I was definitely worried about being outed as a fraud, but I got through it. And then they're like, can you do cocktails for us? Can you do this for us? And it became a job, and they're not getting rid of me anytime soon, I hope.
That's great. So, I mean, it's one of those things where they created the position based on the fact that you could keep an audience for 2 hours. It's not too shabby.
And I love Jack Daniels, and I would take Jack for money for a while.
And, yeah, I mean, that probably helped them potentially get you that, create that job for you. Like, and we don't have to pay him in money. This is amazing.
Like, literally, one of the women I used to work with in the very beginning, I think the first out-of-town job was in San Diego. And she's like, write down your mileage. And when I got to San Diego, she's like, did you write down your mileage? I'm like, I know you always have bottles in your trunk. Like, just throw me a bottle. Don't worry about the mileage. And she's like, okay. And she opened her trunk and handed me a couple bottles. And I was like, this is the greatest job ever.
It's funny. Like everybody has this connection. I mean, you guys know David Allen? So, I mean, they didn't, he used to, when blogging was still a thing, he had a blog called Tipsy Texan, and that was his, then when social media started, that became like his handle on all these different things. But Patron got him early on because as an event and as an event planner and a great bartender, he started doing a lot of events for them because JP, who's one of the owners of Patron, lived in Austin, and they did a lot of events, and they had this great relationship. And I think that David, being a little bit of a tequila snob, had the sort of same reaction you did, ET, where you're like, oh, I didn't realize how much effort and precision goes into making this product. And it's probably one of the best decisions that company made, was actually creating a position for him, because he was their first ever actual brand ambassador, and now runs their entire trade advocacy team for the United States. So that's how sometimes these things happen, which is real. It feels like a very Tennessean thing, where these jobs were created because of relationships, as opposed to it coming from corporate being like, well, we need somebody to fill this position. And I feel like the three of you embody that so well.
Yeah, I think you can't anymore. I think in the beginning of brand ambassadors, we all had friends that one day they'd run in your bar with a case of XYZ vodka and oh, it's filtered through baby tears and it's the best thing ever. And you pick up 2 cases. Yeah. You pick up a couple cases for your buddy, and then 2 weeks later, it's like, oh, I got this gin. I'm like, well, I still have the angel tear vodka stuff you made me buy. But I think now, just like the food revolution, where people know more stuff, they understand technique, they've watched all the chefs, they've watched all the classes, they've read the books. And I think spirits and wine are like that now, where it's not just the people in the know that know, it's everyone. So you can't fake it the way maybe you could 20 years ago. And you can't just be clever and cute. You have to back it up and say, oh, this is why I love this brand. This is why I whatever. And, as the world expands with knowledge, I think these jobs resonate more when people love what they do.
So, by the way, you don't even know how perfect that segue was, so thank you.
No.
But so two things. First of all, for our audience that's with us today, for this next segment, I want to make sure that if you guys have any questions, especially in terms of the cocktail things that come up, please don't be bashful about popping stuff into the chat, because someone on our team will either say something to me or I'll see it in the chat and we'll be able to bring it up to the panelists. But talking about like a passion for what you do, ET, what I really want to dive into is choosing whiskey for appropriate cocktails. So what made me think of this was last week when Lucia suggested some cocktails that she likes to have with Tennessee whiskey. One of the ones that she said was the Busy Izzy, which is actually what I made for myself right here in this mug from the Tonga Room 70th anniversary, which makes no sense. But
Nice.
what I want to ask you guys, starting with Lucia, is I'd like to, based on that thing where somebody in the chat had asked you a question, or somebody on the in the group had asked you a question like, what do you like to make with, or how do you choose between Uncle Nearest 1844 and 1856? And you said that 1856 more for stirred spirit forward and 1844 more for like shaken citrus cocktails, but it led into you throwing out a couple of not standard whiskey drinks to use with which we could make with any of these. I'm not speaking English right now.
You're doing good.
Cocktails we could make with any of these Tennessee whiskeys that people wouldn't naturally think, oh, that'd be great for Tennessee whiskey. So yeah. I'd love to get your opinion on that.
Yeah. As you mentioned, worked in mezcal for 7 years. And at that time, there weren't a lot of mezcal cocktails. So I was very used to having to figure out where it would be an appropriate substitute. And similarly for Tennessee whiskey, although I think it works really well in all American whiskey cocktails, trying to figure out which one of our different expressions or of different whiskeys in general will work in a cocktail. It's just kind of looking at the flavor profile. I mean, I was suggesting 56 for the more spirit forward because it's higher proof, it's 100 proof. It tastes to me more like, a high rye bourbon versus what I think of, or what I did think of as a bartender as a Tennessee whiskey. It's not smooth and low proof, which I think a lot of us were trained to think. But it really does have that, the tonicity, and it has those great barrel characteristics, but really well balanced with the sweetness. And the 1884, I think, works well with the citrusy cocktails because it's a little bit lighter. It doesn't, I use 56 in a lot of spirit forward cocktails as well, but the 1884 often allows those more subtle flavors to shine through because it's lower proof. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just really fun to play around because so many cocktails. I mean, I definitely tend to stay to 3 or 4 ingredient cocktails because I think the best cocktails are often the simple ones that have endured or riffs off of those. So taking those skeletons of cocktails and switching out different flavors and seeing what you like, I think is a really great way to experiment. And because Tennessee whiskey is so versatile, I think you can use it in a lot of things that you might not think. I mean, our CEO Fawn puts it in all kinds of stuff that I'm like, that shouldn't work, but it does. She puts it in mimosas, she puts it in daiquiris, which works as a sour. But you can put stuff kind of Mr. Potato Head, all kinds of different things in Tennessee.
We just saw in the chat, someone posted, I'm sorry, is it Chaya? I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. I love whiskey and sangria.
That's a great idea.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
One of the things that was really interesting, and I think why when you mentioned the Busy Izzy that I lit up, because I love sherry, and sherry and whiskey are such a great combo. mean, we've had Ryan Maybe on the Happy Hour before, and he was talking about the Rieger whiskey that he makes that actually has a couple percent of 10 and 15-year Oloroso in the whiskey, because American, categorized American whiskey can actually, according to the TTB, have, I think, up to 2.5% of sherry specifically. And so I just really love that cocktail because it's actually a sherry cocktail that happens to also have whiskey, almost the same amount, I think, in most recipe. It's sometimes either split base or 1.5:1.
Exactly. I tend to make it a little whiskey heavy, but that was one that we were focusing on, for a lot of reasons, because our brand honors the first African American master distiller, and that cocktail was in the first cocktail book written by an African American. And then we partnered with Williams and Humbert because their head winemaker is also, she's not African American, but she lives in Spain, but is a Black woman. And so there was a lot of things that overlap there. But that drink is just delicious. It's dangerous because it's so easy to drink.
Yeah, Mika posted that she used cream sherry instead of Oloroso, but it still worked. I'm like, of course it's gonna work.
Yeah.
You're gonna be fine.
It is. And I like to make an easier version. I just make a pineapple syrup at home by just taking like equal parts Dole and sugar and shaking it up. So you don't have to go out and buy anything crazy. Super easy.
Yeah. You can always stop by ABV and get some of their pineapple sherry.
Oh man.
Oh Lord.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
I miss that greatly.
We had a hangout last week and Ryan brought a bottle. It's too good.
That's nice. That's when you have to call me. I'll just pop by.
Right.
So on the same note, for both Greg and ET, are there, Greg, you came from the bar a little bit more recently than anybody else, and so maybe your brain, when you walk into an account or you walk into a bar, you're still thinking like, how is something that they're already doing and what's already on their back bar and what's in their rail and the syrups they have, what's something that they can do with Tennessee whiskey? Like, where has your mind gone, recently, where you've sort of given them a good nudge, or something cool has been created based off of your love for cocktails and also trying to figure out how Tennessee whiskey can fit into that?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it has to come from, my background, growing up in San Diego, not Ohio.
Got it.
Okay, cool. Got it. And then I in 2007, I moved to Seattle, and that's really kind of where I found like the craft cocktail scene. I realized really quickly that everyone was very closed off and very shut off and not sharing information. And so when I came to it, I learned a bunch of things and really wanted to share my experience. And so when I walk into accounts now, my thing is like I have to honestly a lot of times dispel mistruths, because people still I don't know what's in the water or if it's just like something that's handed down from generation to generation, but people still kind of don't understand Tennessee whiskey and don't understand what to do with it. So I usually come in with a ton of good ideas, and try to come in with like, hey, listen, like, we are a grain forward distillate. We're only fermented 3 to 4 days. So we're looking for that grain forwardness. We're not a fruity whiskey, whether it be dickel number 8, that's 80 proof, or dickel number 12, that's 90 proof. It's about really finding out, what works with those flavor profiles to kind of pull out great nuances. Very early on, I worked with some incredible folks that were chefs, and they really kind of helped push me along to kind of like find nuances of flavor. I want to share this book because this was a really good book when I found it, and I'm sure a lot of you know about it. Really good book. If you work with chefs and you work with food, it's wonderful to pair cocktails with. I suggest everybody get this. Okay, but there's another book you don't know by the same person, and it is much bigger, called The Vegetarian Flavor Bible. If you're working with just spirits and just all your syrups and your shrubs or whatever, like, this is a really great resource to find a lot of really awesome stuff that can be complementary and really kind of like style you out. And so, you know, a lot of times what I do is I will kind of, I mean, you know, once a bartender, always a bartender, right? I will still try to lab cocktails out and try fun stuff. And, you know, I'll try to like make people change the way they think about an old fashioned, because, you know, a lot of times, you know, people will tell me, well, you know, but I think about an old fashioned, I feel like I need to be sitting on like this bear skin rug with a fireplace and it's snowing outside and it's very winter. And I'm like, okay, well, cool. Hey, look at, like, it's springtime. So have you ever messed with chamomile? Like, let's make a chamomile syrup and let's get some apple blossom bitters and make a new old fashioned. Let's do that. And so it's really just trying to like get folks to realize that there are a lot of avenues, because again, a lot of folks, you know, aren't sharing their expertise, or not sharing with, you know, they're not taking anyone under their wing in the bartending community a lot. And now we've gone through COVID and we have a whole new, you know, new generation of bartenders and some people that are coming back, but people are definitely trying to figure out like what to do next. And so when I roll in, that's exactly what I use, is not only how do I help you sell my juice, but how do I actually help the account and do something really cool that really shows an experience for the guests. Because at the end of the day, we have the greatest job in the world. We get to show people a great time for a living. So why not be really great at it?
So if I was going to make that springtime old fashioned, but I still
Yeah.
want to keep that sort of bear rug thing, can I do it with like the portrait of Burt Reynolds in the background?
Donnie, you could do whatever you want. You know that.
Okay. All right. But you know what I'm talking about? As you were to,
I do.
Was I the only person that was thinking? Is that what you were basically describing? Was
Just,
like...
well, I mean, you know, yes, but no.
Should always be thinking about that portrait of Burt Reynolds.
I mean, I keep it way back there, you know, way back there.
Yeah, you try to push it down, just try to push it away.
Go to my safe place. Yeah,
exactly. Et, can you think of, you know, having been in this role the longest out of any of the three of you, and focusing specifically on Tennessee whiskey, are there any like specific cocktails where you're like, whether it was an accidental find or intentional, are there any like fun things that you can suggest people to make, either as a, you know, subbing Tennessee whiskey in for another spirit for a completely different category, or a cocktail that they know to be from a different category, or just like a fun flavor combo?
No, for sure. I mean, look, when you're Jack, the first thing people think of is Jack and Coke or Lynchburg lemonade. And it takes a minute for people to get out of that mindset. And it's just like, hey, sorry that it got so popular. Like, you know, sorry, not sorry, but it's, you know, but it was really hard to get people to think of Jack in cocktails. So you're like, all right, let me figure that out for them. And the first thing, like you're talking before, tiki, you know, Tennessee whiskey, specifically because of charcoal mellowing, which removes a lot of that fatty acids and those corn aromas and those the corn nose, it really does mellow out the whiskey. So and does change without adding anything. That's what people think about charcoal. When you mentioned Brita filters, sure, it adds no flavor, adds no color. People still don't believe you. But it's not that it doesn't change the flavor, it doesn't add flavors. But when you remove things, it makes room for other things to shine, like some of these vanilla notes, some of the esters you're going to get from whatever yeast you're using. And because Jack's esters really lean towards a little bit of a fruit finish and some banana hints, I find that like tiki's great. So like I make a black tie instead of a Mai Tai, it's a black tie, and I sub Old Number 7 for rum, and then I use our barrel proof as a float, and also use the barrel proof to light the lime on fire and shake a little cinnamon. And it's just fun. And because when you're using whiskey, it's not as sweet as a rum is people's minds. So it's drying it out a little bit more and giving you different nuances. I'm not saying a rum bar should abandon rum and make all Tennessee whiskey cocktails, but why not throw one or two in for fun? Because it does. And then like with single barrel, which is the whiskey that was recommended for this, at 94 proof and at the age and where it's aged and all that good stuff, I love it in the Boulevardier because it really holds up to some of that more syrupy sweetness and it fights its way through. I wouldn't recommend Gentleman Jack, where I would put that in a different cocktail, but I would say single barrel is a great Boulevardier because it has enough strength to say, hey, we can all share this glass, but you're still going to taste me. So my theory has always been, I still do a lot of cocktailing, is you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet, right? So you're going to make some really bad drinks. And when I ever have tasters, I always tell them, look, better than the last one isn't necessarily good, right? Just because the one I made before was terrible and this is better than that, that doesn't mean it's a good drink. You have to want to have two. And once we get to the point where you want two drinks, we're going in the right direction. And then sky's the limit. If it's a fun sports bar, I'll make a creamsicle with Jack Daniels because there's so much vanilla notes, you know. And if you go high end, you can do whatever you want. You can make chamomile syrups. You can do this. You can do that. I say have fun. Open that flavor Bible. Look at something you love like honey, and then say, what does honey work with? And then make a drink.
What if I already have Jack Honey or Tennessee Honey?
Then you're off to a really good start. And I would say, here's a fun fact for you. Jack Honey in a really spicy Bloody Mary as the base spirit, not as a split base, as the base spirit, is delicious. Get a spicy rim. You know, there's a great Bloody Mary mix just came on the market that would be great. It's called Dirty Sue Bloody Mary.
I knew that was coming. I knew that was coming. Yeah.
I heard it's a pretty decent company that I should look into it. Thank you.
You should.
Good tip.
Check it out. Hot
Good
tip.
tip.
But on a real note, Jack Honey works oddly well in a spicy Bloody Mary. And I would even get a spicy rim because it's sweet, so it's going to balance out. And cocktails, like life, like all the stuff we do in life, is balanced. So if you're going to go super hot over here, you got to balance something over here.
That's a good point. I mean, Jimmy posted here that the Flavor Bible is a great cheat for flavor pairings, and that's really what it's for. It's almost like I don't know if any of you guys remember the first Trick Dog menu where they did the Pantone colors.
Yeah.
The first thing I thought of, because whenever I was doing training, I always talked about not only complementary flavors, but conflicting flavors, like things that you wouldn't think work together that really like blow people away. Pineapple and sage being one of them. You know, for those who have ever worked, like all three of you are like nodding your heads, but it sometimes feels like a very weird, savory, sweet, tropical, herbal thing that wouldn't work, and it's like amazing. The first ever global Domaine de Canton competition, the first and second place, who were John Lemaire and Marco Dionysus, both had cocktails that were Canton, pineapple, sage, and they were so close. And as you can imagine, Marco still talks about the fact that it was the difference of like half an ounce of something that made the difference of $10,000 and the win.
Sometimes.
But he's not bitter about it, which is really great. No.
Oh, so he lost. Marco lost. Can we call him right now? Can we call him right now?
That would be fun.
And the funny thing was, both their drinks were amazing, and they were based off of the fact that that particular flavor profile or that particular pairing is incredible. And so I would highly recommend, and we've talked about Flavor Bible in I'm glad you brought it up, Greg, in previous sessions and happy hours and in the Facebook group, because it's such a cool way to find things that you wouldn't have thought of. And,
sure. And fix
not that difficult. It's not that weird or esoteric either.
Right.
Yeah. So
it's just a great resource. Like, you know, if you weren't lucky enough to grow up with or just come up in your bar life with a chef that was just like, dude, I'm gonna take you in my wing. I'm gonna show you what works, because you know they really care. Back of house really cares about what they're putting out on the plate, and if you don't care about what you're putting in the glass, it's not going to work. So just a great resource. So I recommend anybody who's in the industry, if anyone is in the industry on this call, like, man, hook up with your chef. They're everything. They'll tell you everything if you give them a couple beers and a shot, and they'll tell you everything that you need to know.
For those of you who've been subscribers for a while, you'll probably remember we had 2 Februaries ago, we had a Reposado tequila box that was all pairings of bartender and chef collaborations. And it was actually really cool. One of the ones that we did actually from my old bar, Chris and Chef came up with this really incredible cocktail using pickle brine. And it's one of those things that, we've obviously talked about for a while, in particular with Irish whiskey. I'm sure that dickel in a pickle is definitely like a thing you guys have done. But
what do you mean?
What do you mean exactly?
What? Hold on, where's my pen?
But
Write that down.
you should write that down. Write it down. But like, vinegar is a very underutilized thing in drinks. People are starting to discover shrubs. We've definitely had shrubs in some of our subscription boxes, and so a lot of our Shaker and Spoon fam know those things. But it's those kinds of things where you put two ideas together, in particular two people that think in different ways, and that's when they come up with magic. We did that drink for Science the Cocktails 2 years ago, and we made kegs of it and couldn't keep up. Like, it was stupid. And that was with reposado tequila and I believe it was like fresh raspberry and pickle juice. It was, incredible drink. And we also, like, a little bit of a sneak preview, but in our July box, I can't tell you guys what it is yet, but there is a really incredible collaboration between two people who come from different universes entirely. And because one gave sort of an idea to the other one, who took it and like ran with it, it's going to be a super fun cocktail. I love those kinds of things where people get together. Go ahead.
Pickle brine thing, if you think about it, it's salt. So that's why it works so well, because salt is a real magic ingredient in cocktails. It really balances out citrus. So when a lot of people have a super tart drink and they might not like it, if you literally take a pinch of sea salt or a couple drops of saline water, it changes it. And it doesn't seem like it will, but it always does. So salt's a good secret ingredient. When maybe you punch the citrus up too much, you can just add a little salt.
I'll go
ahead,
first.
Greg.
I'll go first. Yeah. Anyways, I've even started to introduce a saline solution into even like, stirred drinks, like something that's spirit forward. It just brings this umami level that, gets your salivary glands going. So you don't just have to leave it at the citrus forward drinks. You put a dash into your Manhattan and watch what happens.
And everything better.
Yes,
it is true. For
That's
those of you who haven't, I'm not much of like a food
yes,
a food show person, but the salt, acid, fat, heat. What's the?
Yeah.
It's
Good
an incredible. It's an incredible series, and it's brief. I think each one's a half an hour or something. It's definitely
or the
worth
book.
watching.
The book's
Great
amazing.
cookbook, too.
Yep.
Salt, fat, acid, heat. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
One of the interesting combos is so one of the questions from Andy was, have any of you used saffron with whiskey? What you can do actually is you can do, when you're trying things out, especially an expensive ingredient like saffron, you can make a syrup out of it and do like a really slow, like not a rolling boil, but a simmer, and try to extract it, because you're going to get more color than you will from flavor unless you're going to throw a stupid amount in there.
Right.
Sometimes that's what extracts are good for that. But to make a syrup, or even like as Greg said, to use like to make a saline solution, find like someone who has already perfected a flavor. Maybe there's a saffron salt or a truffle salt where you make a saline solution out of that. So in addition to giving yourself a texture and giving a little bit of salinity, you're throwing another flavor into that drink, and in a very subtle way.
And then there's always Fernet Branca,
which is never subtle ever, but always delicious.
but you can use it. It has a lot of saffron in it, and you can make some beautiful cocktails with it. You really can.
I mean, they do drive the global price of saffron every year. So
yes, they do.
Yeah.
James had a question about the solution versus the pinch.
Yeah. Does it matter if you use a saline solution versus a pinch? He's guessing more bars use saline for consistency.
Yes.
But does it really matter if you're doing it for yourself at home?
No. Whatever you like is what's good. Don't let anyone ever tell you that's the better way to do it. Bars are high volume and they don't have time to be wrong. So when they make a saline solution or like a hot pepper tincture, that's to make sure that they don't cut into one jalapeno and muddle it, and that's a level 9 and one's a level 3. If you make the tincture with 10 different peppers, you're going to always get what you want. But at home, yeah, do whatever you want. Like I would just say rummage. Like at the beginning of COVID, I used to say, hey, go find stuff like that old hard candy that your grandma left there. Melt them down into a syrup, and now you have a butterscotch syrup, and play around with that. Like if you start with a good spirit, whether it's one of ours or the other great spirits that are out in the world, you're not really going to go that awry unless you do something crazy that's not crazy good. Like, I wonder if whiskey and dish soap tastes good. They don't. They just don't. But if it's in your fridge and you bought it and you like it, it's probably going to go well with other things that you like.
But as you said, you do have to crack a couple eggs. You never know. Sometimes, every once in a while.
Yes.
I mean, I remember as a kid, there was like somebody had like papaya shampoo, and I'm like, this smells too good to not be real. But it tasted like soap. So long story short, yeah.
Right. Well, another trick there is to mix all of the other ingredients besides your whiskey first and see if that tastes good.
Right.
And if it doesn't taste good, start over before you put the whiskey in. If it does taste good, then you got a better shot.
Spoken like a bartender who worries about pour costs.
Most expensive thing goes in last. So when you ruin it.
Exactly.
Oh, and somebody on the team posted saffron extract that's in the Make More store, which I totally forgot about. That's great. So if you guys ever want to try that, it's a great extract that you can add into other things and not have it be overwhelming, but it's a really targeted flavor. It's super interesting.
Cool.
Nice.
Very cool.
So question for you guys, because you're coming from different directions and in different parts of the country, but every month on our happy hour, we do a sort of status on the hospitality industry. Of course, over this last year and a half, it's been really interesting, and the conversations are sometimes very different and sometimes very the same, based on the fact that, overwhelmingly it has been rough on the hospitality business and those involved in it. But, we always talk about like current plight of bartenders, who's helping, what's been impactful, but everything changes so often. So I guess the questions I have for you, so Greg, like being a longtime bartender in multiple cities, who's now a Texas transplant, and you're in an area where bars have been open the longest, what is the current status of the industry there? And then also, how have you seen like suppliers such as yourself helping? What have been some of the silver linings you've seen, et cetera?
Yeah. So, interesting enough, for those who don't know, Texas went full open July of last year. So while we've been open, there's a lot of folks still decided to not do such. We have some incredible places like Alba Huerta's place, Julep. They just opened up May 1st, so they were closed for 14 straight months. Like Houston Watch Company, still closed to this day. Like, just wanted to make sure that they're being safe. Then the rest of the folks are just like, Texas is very cavalier, if y'all don't know that. I said y'all, okay? And so with that being said, like, there were challenges initially, everybody was kind of like, what does this all mean? What are we gonna do? What's going on? So some people were opening, and then TABC would come in and close them down. And so then TABC decided to give people ability to get the other 51 license where you can sell food. And so it was a lot of back and forth, a lot of uncertainty. But one beautiful thing is when I walked into an account and I saw that they were doing interviews. And it was that thing of like, wow, okay, you know what? This is hopefully changing around. Like they need people, they need servers, they need bar staff, they need all that. So it's been kind of like a really difficult go, as it's been for everyone in the US. But what's beautiful about the whole thing is that like there is an understanding that this is going to end, and we're going to get back to quasi normal, right? It's just a beautiful thing. Now, as far as like other things, I've done some interviews with some other brands, like asking my opinion and stuff like that. Like, are craft spirits going to come back? And I absolutely emphatically believe not only are the big boys coming back or whatever, but also craft spirits are coming back. And one thing I want to tell everyone on this call is, everyone who works in the service industry deserves your acceptance and your patience. They're trying their best to deal with what they've gone through the last year plus. So give them some understanding and know that they're doing their best to make an experience for you, and we'll get there together. I mean, this is not easy. There's no manual for how to get through this. Maybe someone will write one. I don't know, but we're getting there. Hope that answers that.
Thank you.
I think some people are writing it along the way too.
Probably, yeah.
If not a quote unquote book, but I'm sure you all know bar owners, bartenders, servers, everyone who's, if you think about getting through a shift at a bar, it's a struggle every night. It's 4 deep, people yelling at you. There's food, there's drinks, there's money, and you know that guy, you don't know that guy, but he's first. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So bartenders and servers and service industry, they deal with a lot. So they are resilient, but this is crazy. And the industry got hit, probably one of the worst that got hit.
True.
But I've seen so many great success stories of people finding ways to not just fight for themselves, but help other people who actually need it maybe more. And when I got to Atlanta, the first thing I saw, there's a bartender here who I've known for a couple of years, Kiata, and she's great. And she started a community garden for bartenders. So bartenders had a place to come. They all had their own plot, and a lot of it was donated from brands or from charitable things, but they had this plot to come grow their own fruits and vegetables, either for the bar or for their home, but it also gave them something to do. It was outdoors, it was safe. And someone wrote her a note that said, that garden saved my life. I was so unstable. And I think without that garden, I might have done something crazy. And that's just someone who could have just sat home and collect unemployment and done nothing. And she decided to reach out. And, we can talk for days about what brands have done and what we did with Uncle Nearest. And that's all great. But for me, to be fighting for your life and still helping, like Travis in Arizona, what he did with his charity and raised millions of dollars. They shifted their whole entire focus to help service industry. So to watch all of that love and outpouring, and every person I spoke to around the country during COVID, there was some type of network that they were involved in, whether it's just calling each other at the base or more extensive. Everyone was figuring out a way to survive together. And I think that shows the human spirit is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
That's such a great example. It's funny, like one of the last things before we segue to this next segment was Chaya wrote, experiments and diffusions have been a great pairing between Shaker and Spoon and my produce subscription box. So,
nice.
Which is very funny, but like there have been, I think I got home on March 15th and, Shannon picked me up at the airport and we went straight to my God, what do you call it? The place that has the plants and the trees and
Nursery?
Thank you. That's the word in English that I'm searching for. And we went straight to the nursery and picked up a bunch of plants. And it's funny how like the next day was the shutdown, and those next couple of weeks, like nurseries were emptied out. There were no tomato plants. There were no nothing because people were actually. And I have like a Google map of my neighborhood of who has what fruit trees and who has what, so that we can take stuff to them and exchange. Sometimes like we weren't growing that much. I would exchange them. I'd give them wine and they would, give us, pomelo or something, but whatever. But that's really great, ET. I'm so glad to hear that that particular thing was happening. There have been some really incredible stories of folks who have beyond persevered, especially since they themselves or their businesses were shut down.
I think it's really important for us to keep in mind also. I know I've been hearing a lot of conversations and reading a lot about the challenges that bar and restaurant owners are having finding staff right now. And there's a lot of talk about people aren't coming back because their unemployment benefits are so good. And I think that there's so much more to that. I think that, yes, I'm sure in some cases that might be correct, but also I think that A lot of people had to leave the industry to find something that was stable, and something that I have been trying to be very thoughtful about is, the mental health implication of being in an industry that gets totally wiped out. You don't have, for a very long time, there wasn't any resource for those folks to fall back on. And now when it's time to go back, there's a lot of anxiety. Like, is this going to stay open? Are things going to change again? Like, what am I getting myself into if I leave my office job or whatever it might be, not office, but my work from home job, and go back into a bar? So I think, what you guys brought up in terms of the mental health challenges that our industry have gone through are really significant.
It's crazy. And think about, I just got here, so I was in LA for most of COVID, and Greg, that was your home for many, many years, California. What no one talked about, except for our, one or two politicians in California, it was really hard and emotionally and physically, straining and mentally straining for all the service industry people, but they were at least getting something. Think about all the people that work in kitchens in California and on the floor that got nothing.
Yeah.
So what do they do? And it broke my heart to think about all the friends I've had over the years working in bars and restaurants in Southern California and thinking they have nowhere to go except find something else to do. And that's another reason a lot of people aren't coming back, because some of them did find another way to make income. And maybe it's more stable. Maybe you don't work till 3 a.m, whatever the answer is. Maybe you stay there, and it is a struggle, but I think the most important thing is for all of us to realize that if you did work all through COVID, to make sure that you were there for all your people. And because sometimes just that phone call helps people, sometimes just reaching out and checking in is all that's needed to shift someone's entire point of view. And it is a struggle. I mean, it's even for like my mom, who wasn't working before COVID or during COVID, but she lives alone.
Yeah.
And it's tough. So it was hard for all of us, but it's nice to see that brands and people and friends and strangers rallied for each other.
Yeah.
It's been, it's been really interesting to see some people have thrown, virtual parties using like the shaker and spoon single, like the little kits. They would call us up and be like, hey, I want to get a group of friends together and do something cool and share this experience with them. They were able to sort of do like this, like do a Zoom where they all had like the little kits, and it was really fun to some of like the stories that we would hear of what cool things people were doing for one another. You guys work for 3 brands that have this great history and this great story, and you're all sort of intertwined as well, which is also interesting, right?
Yeah.
But what's funny is Tennessee whiskey is so much about provenance, about like the fact that one of the things that's different between Tennessee whiskey and bourbon is it has to be from Tennessee, right? So that's something that even bourbon doesn't have. Bourbon could be anywhere in the U.S. But like, for example, Lucia, you were talking in the group the other day. People were asking you about like the various products, but like each one of them stands for something, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, one thing that really drew me to this organization was the story behind it. I was in love with mezcal, and what I loved about mezcal was the story, the culture, the people behind it. And, I was just so deeply tied into that. And I know that there is a lot of history in whiskey as well, but, I just didn't feel as personal of a connection to it. And when I heard about Uncle Nearest, I had that same resonance, because the company, the founder, Fawn Weaver, it was always about preserving the legacy of this man, his family, of Nearest Green, and making sure that the world knew about him, because outside of the Jack Daniels family and the Green family and the town of Lynchburg, where it was very well known. It wasn't very well known outside of that community. And so in order to continue to honor that legacy, Fawn created the 3 different expressions: 1820, which honors the year that Nearest is thought to have been born; 1856, which is the year he's thought to have helped perfect the Lincoln County process; and 1884 is the last year that he put whiskey in a barrel. So every little thing that we do is really meant to continue to cement that legacy, so that people don't forget his name again.
Awesome. And the other question that I had for all 3 of you was, Greg mentioned this a little before, like some of the when you walk into a bar, and sometimes you may have to, you go in there with a target, and you're like, I want to talk to these guys about cocktails. I want to talk to them about Tennessee whiskey. Obviously, I want to talk to them about my brand. But you're like, now I have to spend the first 10 minutes, maybe explaining some of the misnomers they have about the category. And so between the 3 of you, I feel like as longtime bartenders, you may have some pretty funny stories about misnomers that people had specifically about Tennessee whiskey, and I wanted you to share some of those.
Who's first?
I have a funny story, but I'm happy to defer to either one of my.
Oh, go for it.
Go, dude. It's all you.
So when I started, again, it wasn't like there was a Jack guy in LA before me. So
they had barely invented the wheel at that time. So we understand.
True. Fire, yes, not the wheel. But a buddy of mine, Zach Patterson, called me up and he said, "Hey man, the Woodford guy's coming in to do Woodford. My bar is a little bit anti-Jack. I don't know enough to teach them. I'm more of a agave guy. Can you come do your shit?" I'm like, "Yeah." So the Woodford guy goes first, and he did Woodford Old Forester, and like, "Oh, we love Woodford. We love Double Oak. We love Birthday Bourbon." And they're just, I mean, they're tattooing his name on their shoulders. And then he literally says, "And here's the devil, E.T. with Jack Daniels." And their whole mood, just like arms crossed. And I was like, this is going to be a not fun training. So
I'm glad he at least set you up for a positive experience.
Yeah, he set me up to really succeed with that intro. And I said, "Look, ask me anything you possibly want to ask me. You cannot offend me. There's nothing you're going to ask me I haven't heard before. I really want to know what's stopping you from trying to enjoy this experience." And right away, like some 28-year-old, 26-year-old kid, he says, "How much sugar and caramel color do you put in Jack Daniels?" And I was like, in my mind, I'm like, "So you know nothing about whiskey." Anyway, I was like, "None, man, none." He goes, "That's bullshit." I go, "We're not even allowed to. So trust me, there's like a lab in Sweden testing Jack Daniels, praying that we're messing around to save money, and they're going to point their finger." I say, we do everything right. We spend more money than we have to." I said, "I'm so confident that I'm not lying to you, that if you ever find out that Jack Daniels puts caramel color or sugar in the whiskey, or I ever find out, I'll come to your bar, I'll call Brown Foreman, I will quit my job, and I'll streak down Melrose where the bar was." And once I said that, he was like, maybe he's not lying. And then, we started going through it, and then I'm like, it's bourbon plus, and it's, we make everything. Like, you talk about craft spirits. Yeah, Jack makes a lot of whiskey, but they make it well. Like, I would say we're the original craft spirit. There's nothing another distillery does that we don't do, and then we even do more. And we got into it, and then, they picked up single barrel, and then Jack's on their menu now. But the funny part is, 3 months later, a woman I work with in Vegas from Jack, she's like, "Hey, the Bally's group is doing the USBG certification. Can you come out and teach American whiskey?" I was like, "Sure." And like a week before, this was months before, she's like, "Hey, they also want you to do Scotch, Irish, Canadian, and Japanese." And I'm like, I'm the Jack guy. It's not like I'm like an encyclopedia of all whiskey. So I spent so much time making like bullet points of all the big rules, even though they had a book that they could have just given me, but did it all. And I get to the American whiskey chapter. I'm like, skip. I'm like, well, maybe I don't know something. So I open it up, friggin' first page. By law in America, you can add 2% caramel color and sugar and still call yourselves American whiskey. It's like, oh my God. So I panicked and I started doing push-ups. Like, I'm not ready to streak. And I called our master distiller or assistant master at the time, Chris. I'm like, I told him what I bet. I'm like, please say this and so. And he goes, all right, keep your pants on. He said,
Literally.
Yeah. He's like, American whiskey is a big umbrella category. And then there's subsections. And bourbon and Tennessee whiskey are little subsections where we cannot by law or would ever add anything. So oh, thank God. I had a piece of pizza. But I want to retract or revise something I said earlier when I told you my mother didn't work before or during COVID. If for whatever reason she ever gets a copy of this, she's retired. She did work a lot in her life. She's not at home eating bonbons and, sipping martinis in her robe. So it's just clear the air there.
That's good. I literally have an open email to her right now.
Your son thinks you're lazy and entitled.
Yeah.
And
By the way, you would think, first of all, for those who have been in the Shaker and Spoon family for a long time, Zach Patterson was actually one of, I think in our first year, is a Shaker and Spoon alum. He made a really great sparkling cocktail. But one would think that someone who actually worked for him in the Melrose group would already be accustomed to someone streaking down Melrose naked anyway.
That is true.
So.
Maybe he was new and hadn't been to one of Zach's parties.
Yeah, that's right. You wouldn't think it'd be that out of the ordinary.
All right, time out really quick because you brought him up again. So we did a photo shoot for this project I do, and I was at his bar, and he was in a suit and tie, and it was for Single Barrel, and he's shooting photographer, and I had to go meet another bartender to the second shoot, and I leave. The photographer shows up from Zach's bar to the second bar. They're like, hey, we shot a little bit more after you left, and you were talking about Burt Reynolds before.
Oh.
Zach did full Burt Reynolds and only covered himself with this. And he's like, you think the magazine's going to put that on the cover? I'm like, I'm not even going to show it to Jack Daniels.
He was asking you if you would put it on the cover. That's what he was doing.
Yeah.
I know Zach. Zach. He's awesome.
The director would not be okay with that.
No one would.
You're like, as a marketing director myself, I can tell you that.
I actually did. Some bar in LA sent me like an invite. I'm going to say this instead because I don't have a good Tennessee whiskey crazy bar story, but some bar in LA, and I don't remember which one it was, sent an invite because they were going to do an Uncle Nearest party. And the lead bartender was in a Santa hat with a bottle of Uncle Nearest in front of his privates splayed out on the bar. And they were like, this is the invite. I was like, absolutely in no way is that approved for anything.
And awkwardly, it was a 375, so it wasn't even.
It was an airline bottle.
Yeah.
It's 50 mil. 50
oh
mil.
my gosh. I was just like, what are you thinking? Yeah.
That's pretty good. I'm sure that Greg, being the crazy man that you are, have a lot of very funny misnomer stories, especially from Bourbon Branch, about probably whiskey in general, much less Tennessee whiskey.
Yeah.
But I have this vision when I was first learning about the Lincoln County process that there would be a vat filled with whiskey that they would throw in Lincoln logs, and that was the filtration. Like the Lincoln logs would soak in it, and that was the Lincoln County. That was the filtration process. Maybe a little like they pre-soaked them in maple.
The dirty kid fingers on there.
Oddly enough,
that's where all the flavor comes from.
Oddly enough, Donnie, nail on the head, bud. Nail on the head. How did you know?
I had a feeling. So ET, quick thing. So Audra wrote that the Bally's Old Fashioned at their lobby bar uses Jack Daniel's Barrel Select or the Reserve, and brown sugar syrup was the most delicious Old Fashioned I've ever had. So there you go. Came with a smiley face.
Which
so
Bally's, by the way?
Drooling smiley face.
Audra, which Bally's? What city?
That's a good question. I sort of assumed Vegas. But
I'm an Atlantic City native, so I'm thinking maybe old school Bally's.
I don't know. We'll get an answer eventually.
Right.
Oh, Vegas. Yeah. Okay, so we have we're going to keep the chat open for anybody that has additional questions. This would be a really good time to ask anything because we have three pretty fantastic people. So if anybody has a question, throw down. But in the meantime, I want to also thank you guys. We're going to dive into trivia, which people sort of like stay fairly silent because they're really paying attention to what you're saying, because they know that somewhere in there's a nugget. Honestly, one of ET's trivia's questions comes from the actual Facebook group, and it was a topic that got discussed a couple times. So you guys may have to do a little bit of extra digging in order to get that one correct. But his prize is also really amazing. We're gonna do ET. Can we do that second one? The barrel. Yeah. So he has like a barrel to allow you guys to like age things at home. It's pretty cool. So we're gonna make you work kind of hard for it.
And you have to build it yourself.
Mika wrote, I have some gorgeous strawberry mint simple syrup. Any suggestions with Tennessee whiskey?
Oh, yeah.
I just put one in there. Sorry, the autocorrect said Mike, not Mika.
Oh, yeah, that's a good call. Julep would be great. I mean,
daiquiri would be great.
Daiquiri's great. Yeah, whiskey sour is great. Goodness, on and on.
Or
strawberry and mint and whiskey go together so well. It's incredible.
Yeah, there's almost nothing you can't
Castro's
make.
drink. Like Castro's drink, you wouldn't even have to do any muddling work for it.
Right.
You're ready to go.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the
What's that thing called?
Kentucky Buck.
I know, I'm kidding.
Oh, okay. So if you guys want to look up the Kentucky Buck, I'll put that in here. But Kentucky Buck. Granted, it's funny to say like Tennessee whiskey would be great in a Kentucky Buck, but if you were to use any of these Tennessee whiskeys along with strawberry mint syrup and fresh lemon and ginger beer, I would recommend a ginger beer, especially if you're going to do a strawberry mint syrup, a ginger beer with a lower sugar content. So like a Q or a Fever Tree, something that's sharp and low sugar, because a lot of other ones have more sugar than Coca-Cola. So just be careful with that.
Where's Cock and Bull on that list? Is it? I mean, it's definitely spicy. Where's it sugar-wise? I don't recall.
Cock and Bull's pretty high. We like to do it for certain cocktails because, quite frankly, as you said, the ginger on it is so strong.
Yeah.
It's the same with Bundaberg. Like Bundaberg has incredible ginger, but it is very sweet.
It is. Fentimans? I don't know.
Fentimans, we just used the Fentimans rose lemonade in the vodka box a couple months ago, and that is a big winner. But same thing, like the flavor on it is very powerful, but it does have higher sugar content. Their ginger also is pretty great. Yeah.
If anybody lives in the wonderful state of Washington, my very dear friend Rachel has Rachel's Ginger Beer. 4 ingredients. It's incredible. Check it out.
Nice.
And you can only find it in Washington?
Yeah, because it's not perishable, unfortunately. So it's got fresh pressed ginger. It has cane syrup. It has citrus and that's it. Water, I guess.
Yeah, so that sounds pretty yummy.
Yeah, it's very good.
Is bubbles an ingredient?
Oh yes,
I love
carbonated water. Yeah.
These are lifty drinks.
Yeah, it's a very flat ginger beer. It's fine. Yeah.
Okay, Greg,
yes.
I'm going to start off with your trivia question.
Ooh.
Do you want me to ask it, or do you want to ask it?
Well, I don't. I mean, I gave you like 8 questions. I don't know which one you want.
I'm gonna. If you look at the run of show, it is question number 3 on your list.
Well, hold on. Let me.
And you can speak of yourself in third person if you like.
I never. Okay. Oh, is it all at the bottom? There is.
Yeah, all the way at the bottom.
Okay, y'all, if you're listening.
Oh wait, so hold on a second. Before he does this, you guys have to actually get the correct answer in the chat first. So it has to appear in the chat first. So get your typing fingers ready.
Okay.
Go, Greg.
As I mentioned, I have 3 favorite people in this world. One just happens to be my boss. What is their name?
Well, this is going to be good. Sometimes it comes through like in a barrage. I think that you. Oh no.
I didn't want to give up too much. Okay,
Yeah.
so here's part 2 of the question. This person is also the master distiller of George Dickel Tennessee whiskey.
Yeah. The funny thing is that we just got Chris Fletcher, which different direction, but same idea.
Oh yeah, I mean, Chris is a good man. I love that guy to death. But ours is a lady.
Yeah, and he did. Honestly, Chris is. Oh, there we go.
I heard it. I heard it. I got it.
Looks like Jimmy got it.
All right.
So you want to tell people what the right answer is?
Yes, it's Miss Nicole Austin. So I have 3 favorite people. First is my lady. Second is Nicole Austin, and a very close third is Mr. Donnie Ronan.
Oh,
favorite. I love you so much. You know I do.
He says that to all the boys on the Zooms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey.
Awesome.
If it works,
Thank
it
you.
works.
Okay. Jimmy, make sure that you send a private message in the chat to the Shaker and Spoon, to the Shaker and Spoon handle to give them the email address that you use, your subscriber email address.
And then for this special man, I have a bottle of Dickel single barrel 15-year 104.6 proof coming your way with a couple delicious tasting glasses for you. Thank you for listening. Cheers, guys.
That's very cool. And I'm sorry, what did you call it? Your little your special little lady?
I said sweet little gal. Okay.
Thank you. Sweet
You're
little
welcome.
gal. Okay.
You're welcome.
All right. Lucia, let's do, I feel like we have to do question number 1. Now, so that you guys know, she also has a really like incredible a gift or like trivia prize. And so it's kind of a multi-part thing, and it's going to involve a little typing. So you just got to, you can be brief about it, but you've got to get the info in there, but you do have to get all 3 pieces correct.
Oh, you gave me a hint. Okay, go. What is the significance of the 3 years used as names for the 3 Uncle Nearest whiskeys?
Wow.
Woo! Yeah,
Andy, good Lord. I said 3 things, and he's like, you know what? I think he gets an extra point for his intuition on that. That's pretty impressive.
Wow.
Yeah, that was
impressive.
I think you guys are buddies, and you sent him the answer.
No,
I think.
No, I've never met him, but I can tell you that normally when someone gets something that quickly, you're going to get a bunch of middle fingers as chat responses. Everybody here is like congratulating him because they're also amazed at how quickly he did that.
I also really like
in the world.
how like the attention to detail helps perfect the Lincoln County process. Look at that. And yeah.
No, he bullet pointed it, Lucia. Bullet points.
He took notes.
It's like he had it ready. I really appreciate that.
Can I ask Andy a personal question?
I think you can. Andy, do you wanna unmute for a second, Andy?
Sure.
Andy, where do you live? Or at least
I live right outside of Washington, D.C., so I live in Centerville right now.
All right, and you never worked for Amazon?
No.
All right, well, there's an Andy Berger that works for Amazon in Seattle.
Well, they're building a new headquarters near here. But I do have to say, Lucia, yesterday I was driving home from work, and there was a Uncle Nearest advertisement on a big truck when I was driving through DC. So I thought it was a sign.
It was meant to be.
Good work.
You did. He actually posted a photo of it in the group. I saw that.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
I didn't see that. I'll have to go
So
back.
there have been signs, messages coming from above.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Cool. Well, yeah, we will be sending you so you guys had the 1884 in your, as a suggestion, we're going to get you a bottle of the 1856, which is our 100 proof, which is the one that I'm drinking, which I absolutely love. And then also sending you, we have an Uncle Nearest bartender roll up, so you can put all of your bar tools in there for when you're making cocktails and so forth.
Wow, thank you so much.
It makes a great defense weapon as well.
That as well. Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you. That's pretty great. Let's see. Oh, and Andy, Audra said that they're in Woodbridge, so they're close to you. You guys can form a mini, like a splinter group, Shaker and Spin splinter group. Okay, ET, let's do This one's gonna be. I think we should do a two-parter because your prize is pretty grand also, and I think you should ask both 1 and number 3. And I'm going to preface this to the group by saying that you guys may have been paying attention. He did talk about this in the Let's Drink to to our private Facebook group. He did mention it in there, both of these things. But today in the happy hour, he did make mention of one of these things as well. You may have to do a little bit of Googling, but either way, it's worth it. So, E.T., take it away.
All right. So 2 parts. So 2 questions. Who is Chris Fletcher's grandfather? Chris Fletcher is our current master distiller. His grandfather was also master distiller Jack Daniels for about 3 decades. That's question 1. Question 2 is, who coined the phrase the Rat Pack?
Ooh.
And let's see this. You got to get them. You got to get them both. You got to get them both.
Oh.
So far, we've only got 1 right.
Yeah, you guys have to answer both in order to get it right. So just put both of them in your response. You got to get both of them in one fell swoop.
Frank is the right answer for 1 of them.
Yes, that's correct.
But which Frank?
That's correct.
No.
Frank and Frank.
Yeah, no more hints, guys.
Andy,
no more hints. They got to get
Andy's
this. You're
close.
so close.
It's also not Michael Bublé. Even if you think it is, it's not.
Yeah. I mean, logically, you'd think it would be, but no.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. So Mika got it.
Woo, Mika!
Nice.
Very well done.
So Chris Fletcher's grandpa, Frank Bobo, was master distiller during the major growth of Jack Daniels. When he got there, it was a tiny, tiny company. And by the time he left in the 80s, it had grown quite a bit, mostly because of Sinatra discovering Jack Daniels through Humphrey Bogart. Bogart gave Sinatra his first taste of Jack. And crazy story about Chris and his grandpa. Chris was out in LA about 5 or 6 years ago, and a buddy of mine owns a bar, and he ended up getting like a lot of vintage whiskeys unopened from an auction house that his buddy ran. So like from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, like, but unopened, crazy collection. And one of them was, I think, a 58 Jack. So Chris was in town. I'm like, hey, I'm going to bring the assistant master distiller Jack Daniels, but to crack that bottle. So I bring him by and tasting it. It's crazy. I mean, you're drinking a bottle of Jack Daniels that was made in 1958. So Chris holds up the bottle and he goes, back in the day, they used to bevel the year the glass was made. And this says 57, so it probably came out in 58. My grandpa made this whiskey.
Wow.
Which is kind of amazing. And his grandpa passed away last year, but I got to meet him once, and man, like he was there. I mean, he was there with Jack's great nephews learning how to make whiskey. And I was like, how did you go from this to this? He's like, well, when I got there, we had 1 still, 1 fermenter, and 1 charcoal melon vat. And then we got busy. So we built another still, we built another, it's not like it. And that's why when you go on the tour of Jack, it's so convoluted. It's not in order of process, because we weren't building it thinking, or they weren't building it thinking we're going to give tours one day. It's just like, oh shit, we got a room over there for this. Let's put that over there. So you kind of squirrel around. And then, when Sinatra in the early 50s, Jack was still like a regional whiskey brand, and he was at Bogart's house because he really looked up to Bogey, and they were good friends. And it was a dinner party, and after dinner, Bogey says to Sinatra, "What do you want for an after dinner drink?" He's like, "I don't care. I'll drink anything." He's like, "Well, if you don't care, you drink what I drink." He's like, "Well, what do you drink?" He's like, "Jack Daniels." He goes, "What the hell is Jack Daniels?" He goes, "This is Jack Daniels." And he gave him a sip. And don't show this to anyone at Jack, but you're all seen the movie Old School. Kind of like when Frank the Tank touched that beard with his lips, he got so good. That was Sinatra with Jack Daniels. And he literally was like never seen on stage without a glass of Jack. And he would hold it up to the audience and say, "This is Jack Daniels. It's the nectar of the gods." And Bogey, Bogey was the cool guy, and Sinatra was like younger and looked up to him. And apparently one night or early morning, Bacall came home from work, and Bogey was on the other end of a night out with his friends, and they're just smoking cigars, and there's still empty glasses everywhere. And she's like walked in, probably all done up from work, and says, "Will you look at this goddamn Rat Pack?" And Bogey thought that was funny. So he started calling his group of friends the Rat Pack. And after he passed away, Sinatra took over kind of the lead of the Rat Pack. But there was a lot of women involved, besides Bacall, Marilyn Monroe and Judy Garland and Angie Dickinson and yada, yada, yada. But in her book, in her autobiography, Lauren Bacall says in her book, she makes a point to say, "I drank more Jack Daniels than Frank Sinatra." So it's
Lucia, I don't know if you saw the post that I did earlier, just to remind people that this was happening, that the happy hour was happening, and I found this great photo of you with 2 bottles.
I did see that, and I was wearing that shirt today, so I changed.
Oh, really? Because you didn't want people to think that that's like the only shirt that you have.
The only shirt I have. Yeah.
Yeah. Hold on, I'm gonna share screen real quick so people can see it. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna do that so that everybody can see that there. Yeah, honestly, the first time I saw it, I thought that it said, I didn't see the van. I just saw more whiskey, and I was like, all right, sure.
Oh, yeah, and you can't see it, but I am holding 2 bottles.
That also works. I didn't cut it out to keep it sort of so that nobody had brands. I did it because honestly, I wanted to fit all 3 of you on the screen. So yeah, there you go.
Donnie, thank you for adding a photo of me from like 12 years ago.
I wanted to.
Where did you even find that? Where did you find the picture?
First of all, you are ever useful, and I wanted to make sure that people knew that you had made a deal with the devil years ago.
Yeah, well,
number 1. Number 2 is no matter what you do, Lucia is always going to be better looking than you. That's number 2.
Without doubt.
Right. And number 3, I wanted to at least have one, because there was one of ET like that was way too, honestly, it was way too like post photo of like you drinking whiskey, and I just wanted you chilling. Lucia had one with like the professional one with like the barrels in the back, and I was like, this one is much more naturally you, and it was fun, so I grabbed that. And then I needed at least one person making a cocktail, so I was like, great,
okay,
done it.
Got it.
Yeah, it was the first one that showed up when I did an image search, and I was like,
okay,
the first one that was you, that wasn't another Greg West.
Oh, there are others out there apparently.
They're out there.
They're out there.
Greg West, the hot dog king of Fort Lauderdale. There's that one.
That's what.
Is that real?
Say.
I hope so. I really do.
The funny thing is, this Greg West also loves to wear a white T-shirt, jeans, and a sweater vest. So they got that in common.
There you go.
Cool. You guys, thank you. I realize that we're at the tail end, and thank you so much for the time, and obviously to all the Shaker and Spoon family who always come and join us, and for all the people who are gonna watch this over the next coming days, weeks, and months. You have any questions about Tennessee whiskey? Obviously, these 3 people are incredible resources, and so I'm gonna very quickly just post their information in the chat, and obviously they've been in the group as well, so you can always sort of hit them up, tag them to ask them a specific question. But really, thank you guys so much. It's always a pleasure to have everybody together, and 3 of you, of course, are fantastic, and I can't wait for everybody to get their Tennessee whiskey boxes in a couple of weeks, and it's going to start getting nutty.
Thank you so much for having us, and thank you everybody for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So fun.
Absolutely. And remember, y'all, please share your photos of your creations with us. We want to see all that stuff. We totally geek out on it, so let us know.
All right. Thank you guys. Oh, and Mika, make sure that you message with the email thing, because it's a pretty good prize you don't want to miss out on. And yeah, it was Mika and Andy and Jimmy. So make sure that you guys get on that. But anyway, thank you guys. Have a lovely rest of your evening. Cheers to everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.